Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Benji-Sales live chat. It's good to be back. It is so good to see everybody. How are you doing today? I hope you are all doing very well. We've got a pretty big and important topic to discuss today because there is so much really discussion in general in the gaming community right now about games as a service, their viability, PlayStation's heavy pursuit now into games as a service. And there was a couple articles that have hit really in the last week from Bloomberg, both of them, that I thought really made this discussion that we've been having here on my channel for quite a while, and even people online now are heavily debating, and that is around the growing risk of games as a service. And I've been one of these people that's pretty outspoken about how I do believe that games as a service is getting incredibly risky for development. And one thing that I want to make very clear about this is that I'm also not one of these anti-games as a service people, right? Because I think sometimes people see my tweets about how I am, skeptical, honestly, about the state of a lot of these publishers and developers going so all in on these giant AAA games as a service. And I think some people look at that and they're just thinking maybe, oh, Benji's a hater. He's like an old school, only like single player games. You know, he doesn't want games as a service or multiplayer to succeed or something like that. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I play Overwatch 2 literally almost every single day. I really enjoy games as a service titles when they're good. I was a huge Destiny fan for many years. I've fallen off Destiny because I find it incredibly hard to get back into if you miss content for a little bit. I think Bungie has a really bad onboarding experience for Destiny. Even though I think Destiny's a great game, I can't get back into it. Every time I've tried like 2 or 3 times, and I just can't get back into it. It's so difficult to have any idea what's even going on in that game anymore. If you like miss out for 6 months or whatever and try and jump back in. But loved Destiny. I like a lot of service games, right? I'm not anti-games as a service. I would say what I more am is very concerned at how heavy the time and resource investment is becoming into these. And the reality is many of them are destined to fail. I'm just being honest with you. A lot of them. A lot. I would say, it's hard to know the exact percentage, but I would be shocked if even 50% of the games as a service titles in development right now find any sort of success. And we're going to go into all of that. You guys, I'm sure, have questions about it. You guys have opinions on it. We're going to talk about it all. Of course, as always, the way these chats work, we can talk about anything you want. It can be anything in the video game industry. It's just I always have a couple big stories that, I kind of highlight, but we dive into whatever you guys want. So if this is your first time as part of my live chat, the way it works, it's a stream, it's a show, it's 100% driven by you, your comments, your questions. You just drop them down into chat, and we talk about the latest news in the video game industry. There's going to be a few ways to do that. First of all, of course, there is the free method. You type a question, whatever you want, it pops into chat, and I get to as many free questions as I possibly can. If you want to guarantee that I get to your question, there's going to be a couple other ways to do that. First of all, there's the super chat option. Type a donation of whatever you want. It alerts me to super chats, and I get to those immediately. The other way to make sure that you get at least one question answered is to become a channel member. Channel memberships are $4.99 for a month. You just click join, and what you get out of it is I guarantee that every single channel member, every single stream gets at least one question or comment or opinion or whatever you want highlighted in the stream, right? So no matter what, I can't promise that I'll get to every member question because, these chats tend to get really full nowadays, but I guarantee that you're at least going to get one of them highlighted in the stream. And yeah, so before I start diving into your comments and questions, let's talk about these 2 articles that have broken from Bloomberg that really were what spurred me to make this kind of the highlight of today's stream. And that was, first of all, the news that we got about the Last of Us multiplayer title a bit back, right? It was like 4 or 5 days ago or something like that. A ton of people, myself included, were like, where was Factions? And we're calling it Factions, but really it's just the Last of Us multiplayer. After that PlayStation showcase that happened, that game was missing yet again, and we know this game has been in development for many years now. It's not one of those things that's a recent project. It's been in development for many years, and we've only seen concept art from it. We haven't even seen a CG trailer, you know what I mean? It's like there's some games that we only see a CG trailer, and then we don't see anything for a few years, and that's annoying. we haven't even gotten a CG trailer for The Last of Us multiplayer. At this point, I would take even that. All we've gotten is 2 pieces of concept art. So a lot of people were like, where is this game? And Bloomberg actually highlighted exactly what is going on with it. Sony slowed down development of it. The development team has been scaled back, so there is not as many people working on this game as there once was. And a lot of those people have been moved to other projects. Now, it's important to note that The Last of Us multiplayer, as of now, has not been canceled. I'm not even sure if it's ever going to be canceled. This game very well may still be coming out. It just sounds like apparently Bungie came in and looked at it, and Sony's kind of using Bungie right now, given their experience in games as a service, to kind of look at their studio's games and evaluate what's going to work and what's not. And apparently Bungie had some issues with it, and that caused, this project to be rethought a little bit, I would say. So again, this is going to highlight exactly what we're about to talk about with Redfall as well. So let's get into Redfall. Before I tell you my opinion on that, let's now talk about Redfall. And some of you might be like, Benji, Redfall is not a games as a service. It's a co-op shooter. I agree with you. The product that launched is not a games as a service. However, we now know from Bloomberg today, the original vision was games as a service. In fact, it was games as a service for 3 years during the development pipeline, which I think explains a lot about what happened with the final game. I highly encourage you to go read this article from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg. I'm not going to go into all of the depth and detail here, but there's a couple things that I want to highlight, including one quote about this. So first of all, it was originally designed as a games as a service with tons of microtransactions. Apparently there was a lack of direction with this game. They felt like they were constantly understaffed on this game. And maybe the most scary thing that came out of this is roughly 70% of the developers who worked on Prey at Arcane Austin left during the development of Redfall. That's a shocking statistic. That's an insane turnover rate. And here's the one quote that I really want to highlight here from the article. Harvey Smith recently said in an interview with the website Eurogamer that early on he pushed back against the compulsory inclusion of an in-game store, but people who worked on the game said the remarks didn't square with how things played out. For the first 3 years, Redfall had a significant microtransaction plan in place. Only in 2021, with games as a service growing more controversial among gamers, did Arcane finally scrap its unwieldy in-game monetization plan. So again, the final product of Redfall, is it a games as a service? I would say no. However, clearly it was designed that way. Original intention was for this to be yet another big games as a service title. And here's the common thing that you're seeing here between what happened with Redfall and what's currently happening with The Last of Us multiplayer game. These are 2 studios that were known primarily for single-player content. And in the case of Naughty Dog, while they had experimented with multiplayer, in Uncharted 4, The Last of Us Factions mode, they had never made a giant, ambitious games as a service title, and this was really going to be their first one. You could say the exact same thing about Arcane. Originally, Arcane, what are they known for? Games like Prey, games like Dishonored. They're not known remotely for a big games as a service title. So I'm not surprised that either of these studios had huge issues adapting to making games as a service. I do want to say that I think studios should always be available and have a chance to experiment, try new things. You don't want Naughty Dog to only make the same exact game over and over again. You don't want Arcane to make the same exact game over and over again. But just these 2 studios illustrate what I believe is going to be a growing issue over the next 5 years, and that's that there are so many of these in development right now that even these studios that are struggling to make them right now, not only are they struggling to get them out the door, because making games as a service games is incredibly difficult, by the way, guys. I see this debate online about which is harder to make, a single player game or a multiplayer game. Well, there is no one size fits all, right? There might be some single player games that are harder to make than a multiplayer. There's so many things that go into it. However, the idea that making a multiplayer focused game is just so much easier than single player, because I have seen some people say that because, hey, it has no story, and it has no big exploration or anything like that. Dude, that's not true at all. The amount of effort that goes into these big multiplayer games as service titles, we're talking hundreds of devs for many years, and then all the post content with hundreds of devs for many years afterwards. Again, I'm not telling you straight up a multiplayer game's harder to make than single player. They all have different challenges. But this idea that they're just easy to make is patently false. You have a lot of studios struggling to even make these games right now. And then the ones that ship, there is going to be insanely fierce competition across the board in this genre over the next 5 years, to like an absolute extreme degree. We have PlayStation themselves putting out many. We have all the third parties putting out many. And here's the thing. I've talked about this on chats before. There is a limit to the audience. Okay, there's only so many people that are playing multiplayer games every single day. And of those people, most of them are playing Call of Duty, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Apex, they're playing Destiny, and if they're into sports games, they're playing FIFA or they're playing Madden, right? Even if there's hundreds of millions of people doing that, there's still, no matter what, a set amount of people. Those people are spending hundreds to thousands of hours per year playing those games. And if you launch a new service title, you have to somehow convince those people that are already completely invested in those games to now do less of that and instead come play your game and invest hundreds to thousands of hours within that, and not do Call of Duty, not do Apex, not do Destiny, not do Fortnite, not do Overwatch, just hugely less of that and instead of your game. That is so difficult to do. It's insane. And again, I don't want to say that people shouldn't be trying to make service games, because here is the flip side argument that you see. You see people say, hey, Benji, of course they're hard to get success in, but the reality is if 6 or 7 fail and you get one big hit, then suddenly it's worth it. If you can get the next Destiny, if you can get the next Apex Legends. And I somewhat, from a pure publisher perspective, understand that viewpoint, because if you can get an Apex, if you can get a Fortnite, it's completely game-changing for your business. So I don't necessarily blame publishers for pursuing this. However, one thing I want to caution is that people brush off those other 6 or 7 devs, right? They're like, hey, 7 come out, 6 fail, but the 1 hit, so now we're all gravy. No, the publisher might be gravy, but what about those 6 studios that just failed? You're going to see mass layoffs. Look at what just happened at Deviation Games, who are making a games as a service for Sony, and it appears that title was canceled. Huge layoffs to that staff. Guys, this could become a very real, very recurring problem for a lot of studios. And sure, maybe at the end of the day, Sony gets a big hit. But what about all these other studios? What about all those employees? They're just going to be out of work. They're just going to have to find new jobs. Or if they don't get fired, they have to somehow rebound and figure out what they're going to do next. Guys, it's a very, in my opinion, risky thing coming into this industry. And there's a lot to it, man. There's a whole lot to it. I don't want to say that single player games, by the way, or non-service games have no risk, because that's the other thing. You see people be like, only make single player. No, every single game that gets released, every single one is risky, because making video games is very, very expensive and it takes a long time. So, it's not one of these situations where it's just like the cure for everything is make no service games, only make single player games. They're all going to be risky. But the big issue here for me is that I think service games are going to become riskier than single player games, because how are you going to draw and keep that audience for all of these games? It's just not possible. Tons of them are going to fail. Big single player games, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, whatever, 100 hours. Eventually they finish that game and they want to go on to their next game. These service games don't end, right? Ideally, if you have a successful service game, look at World of Warcraft. It is still going, right? Look at Final Fantasy, the MMOs, still going. They've been going since Final Fantasy 11. They're still going. Look at Destiny. Look how long that's been going. Look at how long Fortnite's been going. They don't end. Ideally, these people that join into these games, they're playing them for 10 years, right? Doesn't happen with a single player game. For single player fans, they beat the game, even if it takes them 50 hours. Eventually they beat it and they want another game to play. These service games, if you convince someone to try your free-to-play game for 20 hours, but then they leave and go straight back to Fortnite, guess what? you didn't succeed, right? You want them permanently on your game. Or if it's not permanent, you want them for many, many years dropping money into it. It's going to be a problem, guys. It's absolutely going to be an issue, and the industry needs to be very aware of this because I think there's potentially big problems coming. All right, that is my preamble off the top. Let's get into your comments and questions. I already see some member questions. There was already, I think, one new member. Yes, we have one new membership here from MD for a 1 month renewal. Thank you so much, MD. Benji, a very important story got buried this week. It broke a few days ago. Surprised you didn't see. It's that you're the greatest analyst of all time. Well, MD always has the nicest comments. MD always gives me such incredible support. And I'll say it every time. I am not the greatest analyst at all. There's guys that get paid to do this. I do not get paid to do this. So clearly they are superior to me if that's their job. But I would say I am at least okay at looking at the video game industry because I've managed to build an audience. And I don't think I would be able to do that if I had no idea what I'm talking about. So, MD, very much appreciate the support as always. Thank you for being a channel member for another month. I will not say I'm the greatest at all. I won't even say I'm great, but I would say I'm maybe okay at looking at the video game industry. Thank you so much, buddy. All right, and no super chats, so we'll go straight into more member questions. Split End 89 here. Benji, excited for Gamer Christmas next week. Well, great to see you, Split End 89. Great to see you, buddy. Thank you so much for helping mod the channel and being a great friend. Yes, I'm very excited. I actually took off work for it. So that way I can cover all of the goodness that's going to be coming. We got the Xbox Showcase on the way. We got Ubisoft Forward on the way. We've got Summer Game Fest on the way. There should be a bunch of fun stuff, right? So even though today's topic is maybe leaning a little slightly negative or whatever, and there was a lot of negativity around that PlayStation Showcase, there's some really cool stuff on the way. So yeah, I would say I'm incredibly excited. I would say the thing I'm most excited for is the Xbox Showcase because I'm expecting it to be pretty strong, pretty good. I'm really excited to see Starfield. I'm really excited to see, you know, some of the other games that are hopefully coming from Xbox. Really hope Hellblade 2 is there with a release date or a release window. So I would say the thing I'm most excited for is Xbox. But I'm excited for Keely's show too. I think Keely's going to have some pretty cool stuff to show as well. He usually always has at least a couple big surprises. You know, the Jeff Keely shows, whether it's the Game Awards or Summer Game Fest or the Gamescom streams he does, you know, there's always different grades to them, right? Sometimes they're really, really strong. Some years they feel a little bit weak, but it's pretty much always, he at least has one or two very cool surprises there. So I'm sure Keely's going to have some cool stuff too. But I'd say I'm most excited for the Xbox show. Joseki here with some member questions. Great to see you, Joseki. Hi, Benji. Microsoft's lack of management of yet another developer / project is proof that no matter how much money they spend buying half the industry, you need great leadership to make great games. And to be very frank, I owned an Xbox console for the past 6 years, and I've yet to see any proof Microsoft has this great leadership. The great success like Forza are vastly outnumbered by failures. The only thing keeping me from selling my Series S and buying a PS5 right now is the 2 years of Game Pass subscription left on my account, sadly. Well, Joseki, I think the one point you make here that I completely agree with is that Xbox has just frankly not been consistent enough about delivering games that tell people to buy their console or get into their ecosystem over, you know, PlayStation or Nintendo. Now, it's not to say that Xbox hasn't made some great games because, as you pointed out, Forza, I think Forza Horizon 5 is amazing. I was like gushing about that game whenever it came out. I think Hi-Fi Rush this year was absolutely spectacular. However, it is true that those have been pretty few and far between really since the Xbox One generation, right? It's not that Xbox never has good games. In fact, there are some great games that come out of Xbox. I think Gears 5 is an excellent and underrated game. However, there's just not a consistent enough level of that. The hope is that that's what all of these acquisitions are going to provide. However, I get people getting burned out and getting tired of hearing the games are coming when all of these acquisitions have happened and we've yet to see it pay off, right? So they've bought all of these studios. Most of them haven't even launched a game yet under Xbox, right? If you look at Ninja Theory in terms of like a big new game, they had that Bleeding Edge, like small little multiplayer thing, but we're talking like a big game, right? There's been no big game out of Ninja Theory yet. under Xbox. We know Hellblade's coming, but again, it's not here. There's been no game from Compulsion, right? There's been no big new game from Bethesda Game Studios. There's been no big new game from Machine Games. There's been no big new game from tons of them, right? I mean, I could just sit here and list all of them for you. So I get why people are now feeling burned out and being like, yeah, you're buying all of these studios like Joseki's mentioning, but where's the payoff to that? And that's what Microsoft has to start delivering, right? So ideally, and people hear this every year, ideally, this is the year you start to see that payoff, right? We were hoping that Arcane with Redfall would be the kickoff to that, which unfortunately did not happen. Next up is Starfield, so hopefully Starfield kicks us into that. But we're in a window now that if the games deliver and you get Starfield that comes out and delivers, that'd be awesome because that's a new acquisition studio. You know, Bethesda Game Studios' first game, big hit. Hellblade 2 does not appear to be far off one way or another, so that would be another acquired studio with a big new, hopefully high-quality game. If Avowed is sometime in the next 12 months, like I'm suspecting it is, that would be another big new Obsidian game, a new acquired studio. So the hope is that we're about to go right into that window that all of these purchases are about to finally pay off, and we're about to see, you know, the payoff for all of this investment. But I understand people not just like, you know, blindly believing and accepting that out of Microsoft after what we've seen. So yeah, they got a lot to prove. Xbox has a lot to prove. And I think it's like somewhat do or die time for the brand. And I don't mean do or die in terms of like, as strong as that sounds, where it's like die, like the Xbox business is just over if it doesn't pay off this year. But I think the idea that like, we'll see Xbox really explode and just have tons of growth and Game Pass soar to incredible numbers and high console sales and like this idea that a lot of us thought coming into this generation might happen. If they can't deliver this year, like if Starfield disappoints, if Hellblade 2 somehow comes out and disappoints, if Avowed somehow were to come out and disappoint, I'm not telling you I expect this. I'm saying if that scenario were to happen, I think you really have to question, like, are they really going to have a lot of growth? Because you have to have games to have growth. Like they just go hand in hand. It's the video game industry, right? It's not just industry, right? You can't just have the word industry and just focus on that. It's the video game industry. So you have to have the video game part for the industry part to happen. So very important for them. Very, very important. They need to start having these games hit. Casual Noob Gamer here with a member question. With single-player game budgets and development time getting bigger because in part to 4K graphics, would you imagine games going back to 1080p to alleviate that issue? Or is it 4K or bust going forward? I think there is a very real question, Casual Noob Gamer, about scoping games. I think that we're getting into dangerous territory where the scope for every game now is so ambitiously massive that it's becoming incredibly hard to just ship games. And you guys have seen me. I've been saying this for years. The biggest existential threat to video games right now is how long they take to make. I'll repeat it over and over again. There's no bigger threat, right? We're talking about games as a service, and the risk is for games as a service. Part of that's how long they take to make. If it takes you 6 or 7 years to get a games as a service game out the door and it flops instantly, you just wasted 6 or 7 years. If the same applies for a big single player game, if it takes you 6 or 7 years to make it and it flops out of the gate, you just wasted 6 or 7 years. The turnaround on movies, and again, I'm only saying movies because it's just another form of entertainment. I understand they're vastly different mediums. But a studio can afford a box office bomb, and a director can afford, or an actor can afford a box office bomb, because it still sucks, but let's say it comes out and bombs, you can make another movie in 2 years, right? Like you can turn around a blockbuster in 2 years. Most of these blockbusters are being made in like 2 years, really, you know, not counting pre-production. Once you start going into filming and post-production, it's usually about 2 years. Video games? Dude, we're talking 6, 7 years. The amount of time it takes to recover from a failure is a huge issue, and part of that is scope. Games are so scoped right now to be massive. They're these massive open worlds, and they're these incredible animations, and they're these incredible graphics, and they're these just everything has to be pushed to the limit. And the issue that's causing is it's taking so long to make games that the industry is under huge threat of it. So I think there is a question about, can things be done to maybe scope better? Is there certain things that maybe we need to just accept that we need to like maybe not push so far in? Is there new technology tools coming down the pipeline that can help alleviate this? Casual Noob Gamer, I'm not a dev. I am not some great developer that has the answer for you for that. That's going to have to come from the dev community themselves. But if you're asking me if I think that the scope issue is a real danger to video games, the cutting edge graphics, the incredible everything, yes, of course, it's a huge factor in all of this. So many issues in the video game industry get fixed if games take 3 years to make. And I know they don't. And I'm not saying that devs, you should be making games in 3 years, because I get that that's unrealistic. I'm just saying, in a perfect world, if you could make AAA games in 3 years, this whole industry looks different. The entire thing. The financials look different. The turnover looks different. The risk evaluation looks different. Everything looks different. The whole industry changes if somehow AAA games could be made in 3 years instead of 5, 6, 7 years. But it's not the situation we're in. So I don't know, man. I don't know. But I don't think that switching to 1080p would fix things, no. Because these machines are so powerful now that they can just output higher resolution than that, just like kind of at will. It's not really a resolution issue. It's just a whole scope issue, right? And I get why the scope gets pushed so hard, because if you come out with bad graphics or bad animations or not a huge open world, then, you know, then gamers complain and the game gets review bombed and it sells worse. So it's like a... You know what I mean? It's like a battle. It's like a battle between expectations and what you can deliver. A couple super chats coming in here. Plus, we got Split 89 that gifted a membership to Blazing Flame. That is so cool. Awesome of you, Split End. You're always gifting memberships in these streams. Thank you so much, buddy. You don't have to do that. Very kind of you to do for the community. And Blazing Flames, congratulations, man. You are now a channel member for the next month thanks to Split End. So drop some questions and I'll get to them, Blazing Flame. Okay, couple of super chats here. Anthony M. Johnson, Mercenary Knight Publishing. According to insiders like Grub this morning, Fable is still a mess and needs 2+ years at least. Is it a mistake to show it off at the Xbox showcase? Wow, I missed that. I missed that. If that game is still 2 years away... Guys, that would mean... So optimistically, it's 2025. That would mean that Fable was in development for 7 years. What did I just talk about? What is the last thing I just discussed? The risk of how long it takes to make games. If Fable, and again, this is if, I do not have this information. If Grub is correct, and if this is really what he said, that this game is 2 years away at least, putting it at 2025, that is a 7-year development cycle. You guys tell me if that's sustainable. Do you guys believe, watching this stream, that games taking 7 years is sustainable for the industry? Do you think it's sustainable for Playground to employ people for 7 years to make a game with the huge risk that it might fail when it comes out? I don't think it's going to, but it might. You tell me. It's not sustainable. It's not. The video game industry is in a real spot right now where we've got to figure out how to get games shipped in smaller windows. Again, I am not telling you I have the answer. I do not. I am not telling you, hey, Playground, that game should have been out in 3 years instead of 7. Unrealistic. But this what's happening with Fable, it's not just Playground with Fable. What did we just talk about with the Last of Us multiplayer game? That's been in development since, I believe, 2018 is when they first announced that there was going to be some sort of, multiplayer project standalone for the Last of Us. And that ain't coming out anytime soon. So it ain't just Playground. And look at how long it's taken Rocksteady to make the Suicide Squad. It's an industry-wide problem. I don't know if it's a scope issue. I don't know if we need... I don't have the answer for you. But guys, this is not sustainable. We're going to see massive issues in the video game industry if this continues. If a 6 to 7 year dev cycle isn't an outlier, but becomes the norm, good luck, because it's not sustainable. So if it's 2+ years away, then Microsoft should not show it, especially if it's in a messy state. I'm hopeful that that's not accurate. I'm hopeful maybe it can come late next year, but if it's 2+ years away and not in a good state, then I would not show it. But that is shocking if it's still in that situation. Because again, Fable's not a game that's been in development for like 2 years. You know what I mean? Fable's been in development since 2018 is when they first announced Playground was making an RPG title, which was Fable. And we're now in 2023. So it's been in development for 5 years. 5 years and still nothing to show. That is worrying. Highlander001 with a 5 super chat. I have said, and thank you so much, Highlander. I have said that for some time, Microsoft's hands-off management style has been wrong for years. As for the Xbox showcase, I'm excited but not over. I agree with this. I said this a while back. I said Microsoft learned actually the wrong lesson from what happened with Mojang and Minecraft and what happened with Lionhead and Fable. And for anyone that doesn't know the story, essentially what happened was Microsoft said that they felt they were way too hands-on with Lionhead, who was the developer of Fable, right? And as many of you know, Lionhead was eventually closed. They were shut down. And part of that, Microsoft themselves have admitted, was because they were so kind of controlling of Lionhead. They were like, hey, you know, we want you to make a Fable Connect game when there was that big Connect push. And they were like, hey, we want you to make a multiplayer Fable service game back whenever Xbox One was coming out. And that studio wasn't really in a place to make those sort of games or make them super well. And that studio ended up closing. And Microsoft said that part of it, they feel, was how forceful they were with some of those projects. And then they said, well, we bought Mojang, and we were basically completely hands-off with Mojang, and look at all of the success for Minecraft. And one of the learning lessons that they themselves have iterated is how, you know, we've learned that we need to be really, you know, letting these studios thrive and keep their culture, and we shouldn't really interfere and things like that. And on the surface, that sounds great. In a sugar and rainbows universe where you can just kind of come in and just be like, studio, you do your thing. And, you know, we can just watch it flourish and do super well. And we can be the perfect publisher that's hands off and just lets you go. That all sounds great, but not every studio is a Mojang. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I want Microsoft to come in and be Mr. Dictator and telling everyone you must do exactly this and you must do that and you must do that. And it's all about striking that perfect balance. Not every studio can be a Mojang. Not every studio can be just self-sustaining and do their own thing. And you essentially can just walk in the door, look at projects and be like, dude, you guys are doing great. The reality is that's not true of every studio, just like it's not true of every business, right? Any business, right? I work for a big box retailer, okay? I won't say which one, but one of the big box retailers, I work for them. Some of our stores, district managers come in, they walk the store, and they're like, wow, you guys are doing great. I don't really have to do much here. Great job. Good to see you, and I'm out the door. And then some of them, the district managers come into their visit, things ain't going that well, and that district manager has to be a lot more hands-on and figure out the issues and figure out what's going on. It's all going to vary, and Xbox at some of these studios needs to definitely step in and figure out what is going on. Why is a game taking so long to ship? Why isn't it shipping at the quality we expect? What sort of changes do we need to make? I think Microsoft's learning these lessons, by the way, so this isn't all doom and gloom. I don't think it's like it's an insurmountable, impossible problem to solve. I think Redfall was a massive learning lesson for Microsoft. So I have a feeling things are going to start to look a lot different in terms of management styles and how controlling or not they are. But being totally hands-off and very laid back, which I've heard from many studios, by the way, I have heard this for quite a few years, that Microsoft is pretty laid back and hands-off on them. That's not going to work for every team and every studio. It's just not. Ideally, you can fix some issues and get teams there, but just hoping that that happens is not going to work out. And thank you for that super chat, Highlander. Jacob Novick here with a super chat. Thank you so much, Jacob. Hey, Benji, I have shifted my focus to PlayStation's Project Q. In the beginning, I saw it as stupid. Sales prediction from you, I will buy it, by the way. I have no idea what to think about Project Q. I've had people ask me this on the last stream. I don't really know. To me, Project Q really depends partially on price. Like, how expensive is this thing? You know, I think there are some people that are genuinely going to love Project Q. I think there's some people it almost gives you that Switch functionality, right? Not completely to the same degree because you can take a Switch with you and it has a native game running on it. But I mean, especially within your own household, a lot of people like to be able to just have their Switch connected to their TV, and then if they're going to their bed or the couch or whatever, they can just pick it up and play it. You know, a lot of people love that functionality, and you know, the Q kind of gives you that. So I think there's some people that honestly are going to love this thing. But I also at the same time just don't see it as a mass market device. I don't see it as sort of the thing that's just going to sell tens and tens of millions of units. But I could be wrong. I think a lot lives and dies by price. I think if this is over 200, they're going to run into some huge issues. I personally think it needs to be 199 or less. If it's 250 or 300, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know, man. I don't know how many of those you're going to sell at that sort of price tag when it's not a native functionality, right? It's more of like an add-on to the console. I was originally thinking that this would have like really strong streaming capabilities and all sorts of things, and it doesn't really do that. So we'll see. We'll see. But I would say my expectations for it are not high. But I think there are some people that will genuinely love the Q. Now, how many of those people there are, I don't know. We'll have to see. The Professor with a 220 super chat. Thank you so much, The Professor. Only Respawn did it in 3 years with Jedi Survivor. Yep, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare a AAA game can get shipped in 3 years. And even Jedi Survivor, while the game itself is extreme quality, the actual state of the game from a technical standpoint clearly was not ready in that time. Like, that's another game that probably should have been delayed another 3, 4, 5 months for polish, right? Not because of content. The content's great, but in terms of polish. So even Respawn, while they did get it out in 3 years, it wasn't a perfectly ready to go game within 3 years. So again, I don't have the answers. Like, whenever I sit here, I don't want it to look like Benji on his soapbox lecturing the development community about when to ship games. That's not what I'm getting to at all. Because I'm not a developer. I do not have the answers. It's just like an outward analysis of like what is risky right now about games. And a huge component of that is how long they take to make. If we could consistently get 3-year game cycles, again, I'm not saying it's realistic, but if we could, there would still be risks with games, but at least it's like, wow, that game underperformed. Let's get on our next project. We can get another one out in 3 years. You could potentially get 2 games out right now in the time it's taking to make 1. That's a huge difference to your risk analysis, right? If you could make 2 games in the span that it's currently taking for many companies to make 1 game, suddenly it's a lot. It's still risky, but it's not as risky as it is now. You know, it's an issue. But yeah, it's hard. It's a huge challenge. Very few studios are shipping a AAA game in 3 years right now. Very, very, very few. It's a rare exception. Jacob Novick with another super chat. Development hell or not, make it 10 if Xbox wants. Fable needs to be like the Elder Scrolls, meaning 10 years, because Fable is a game which needs to not miss. I do agree with that. They should absolutely not rush Fable out the door, right? I think it's potentially an issue if that game takes 7 years to make. It's just not sustainable for every studio, especially, you know, like Playground, to be taking 7 years. But now that we're already taking this long, you know, ideally, you definitely do not rush that game. They need Fable to be in a great state whenever they eventually launch it. Ideally, though, Fable 2, or whatever the follow-up to this Fable reboot's going to be, ideally, that doesn't take another 10 years, right? Ideally, you take the learning lessons from Fable 1 and don't have this issue with the next game. But, yeah, at this point, you are right, Jacob. They definitely do not need to rush it. Like, it's already been in development for so long, they got to make it polished and great. So, yes, I agree with that. Yep, do not rush it no matter what. We're already this deep now. You know, don't do it. All right. Some more member questions to get to. David Taylor, hey Benji, I'm late. Can you repeat everything you already said? David, I cannot. The good news though is this is the VOD capability. You can always go back and just watch. Oh, and it says just kidding, obviously. Yeah. You can always watch these streams after the case. Most of the viewership for my streams comes after the live stream. But great to see you, David. IcePick1878 here with a member question. Hey, Benji, what did you think about the situation at Embracer? Yeah, this is a crazy story. Their shares absolutely collapsed. Who do you think their mystery customer was? This is fascinating. So for anyone that's seen this, what was the total estimated thing on that? Wasn't it a multi-billion-dollar deal? I know it was over $1 billion, but wasn't it multi-billion? Let me check this really quick. Yeah, $2 billion. So I thought multi-billion-dollar, $2 billion. So for anyone that missed it, Embracer essentially thought they were almost about to finalize a deal that was going to cover 6 years, and it was going to result in $2 billion for Embracer. We're talking a lot of money, right? At the last second, apparently, literally last second, this thing fell through, and now that deal is dead. And the resulting fallout from this was Embracer's shares completely collapsed. Now, it's an undisclosed party. We don't know who it is. IcePick, I think it was probably Amazon. Probably Amazon. Amazon has a lot of money. They're the sort of person that can just throw around $2 billion. Amazon is aggressively moving into the video game industry, whether that's projects they're making themselves or games they're partnering with, like with Blue Protocol that's going to be coming up from Bandai Namco. Amazon's very much trying to move into this space. Of course, it could be somebody else. It could be Xbox, potentially. It could be, I'm not saying it is. I think that's unlikely. But however, there is a working relationship there between Perfect Dark. Embracer Studios are working on Perfect Dark. But I think the most likely scenario here is Amazon. Probably Amazon. They're the ones that got the money. They're the ones that are trying to work with multiple partners. That just makes sense to me. I think it was probably Amazon. But I don't know that. That's not insider information. That just makes sense. And what do I think about it? Yeah, Embracer's in a lot of trouble, man. Embracer, for how aggressive they've also been in acquisitions like Microsoft, they haven't had very good earnings for a long time. So Embracer, not in a great spot. I'm not saying Embracer's doomed by any means, but they got to figure some stuff out because they have also not been having very good financial reports or success lately. Luckily for them, Dead Island 2 did super well. So they really needed that. But in general, yeah, things have not been great for Embracer the last couple of years, really. Can be. Hi, Benji. What's a game that you love, but for whatever reason, you never beat it? For me, it was Breath of the Wild. Loved my time, but drifted away before beating Calamity Ganon. That's a great question. This is pretty rare for me. I'm usually very good about finishing games, but let me think. What's a game that I just never finished that I loved? Sounds super weird. I honestly can't think of one. I'm usually one of those people that just sticks with games, even games I don't love, I feel mediocre on. I'm just a finisher type person like that. I feel like once I start a game, I have to beat it. Ken, it's a great question. I honestly can't think of one though. I can't think of one. I'm sure it's happened, but it's so rare for me that off the top of my head I can't even think of one, Ken. But that's just because the neurosis of me just having to finish games. It's so rare that I just step away from a game without finishing it. All right. Has every member gotten a question answered? And every super chat? I think so. Dude, hey, Benji-Sales, what's up? Can't wait for Marathon. I agree. So back to my original concern about games as a service. I think Marathon's going to be huge. I think Marathon's going to do really, really well. Really, really well. So I'm with you. I think Marathon will be huge. Okay. Let's start diving into your guys' free questions. SD saying greetings from to Benji. I think the Bungie acquisition from Sony was key because if all live service games from Sony fail, they at least will have Bungie with Destiny, Marathon, and Matter next as their live service successful games. I'm completely agreeing with what you're saying right now. How big do you think Marathon will be, and how key will Bungie be for PlayStation to successful in their live service future? Having Destiny 2, Marathon, etc. is huge for Sony. Thoughts? I completely agree. So back to what I was saying about live service being super risky. Part of why I think live service is super risky is because we're seeing so many new studios that don't have a history in this trying to do it. And so many brand new studios that haven't even shipped games trying to do it, right? If you look at a lot of the live service push that's happening right now from PlayStation, out of what we know, right? You have the Last of Us multiplayer title. Naughty Dog has never shipped a games as a service title. People will say, yeah, look at Factions. I totally agree. I'm not saying they've never shipped a multiplayer game. They've never shipped a standalone. It's its own thing. It is built specifically just to be a big, huge, successful multiplayer title. They've never done that, right? The multiplayer for Factions was an add-on. It was part of The Last of Us. Uncharted 4 had multiplayer. It was part of Uncharted 4. So they've never done it. You look at, oh my God, my brain's not working. My brain's literally not working. I was going to say another studio, but it's not working. You look at Haven. Haven's a brand new studio that's never shipped a multiplayer game. They've never shipped any game. You look at Firewalk, a studio that's never shipped a multiplayer game. They've never shipped any game. So that's another part of why it's risky for PlayStation right now, is most of their service games that they're building right now are coming from studios without a history of it, or studios that have literally never even shipped a game. So that's a bit risky. The difference with Bungie is just about up there with Blizzard as one of the studios that just knows what they're doing with online service games. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that they're perfect, right? Destiny had years of issues before they could really hit a cadence that people liked. Destiny 2, I know right now, currently, for some people, is not in a state that they love. But if you just look at Bungie as a whole, they are one of the shining examples in the industry about being able to maintain a live service game. Blizzard, for as much as everyone complains about Blizzard, look at World of Warcraft, look at Diablo, look at Overwatch. People love to say Overwatch is dead. It's not even remotely dead. Again, a studio that just knows how to make service games. Whether you love them, whether you hate them, whether you love everything Blizzard and Bungie does or not, these are studios that they have a history of it. They have that built-in pipeline. They know what they're doing. I think that Marathon's going to probably be huge. Matter, we don't know. We need to see. That's the new IP that's in development at Bungie. It's never been officially announced, but we kind of know some things about it due to concept art and NetEase's announcement about this a while back, and even Bungie themselves confirming that they're making a new IP. But yeah, I think Bungie's huge for PlayStation because Destiny's going to continue to be successful for many years, and Marathon's probably also going to be a huge hit. So they're very important. Cameron Swear, Benji, what do you think happens if the first 5 or so live service games from Sony don't really hit? Oh, man. What I think happens, unfortunately, is a lot of layoffs. And that's why I keep saying that I find this very, very risky. It's not just about the risk to Sony financially. It's about the risk to all of these devs and all of these studios. Look what just happened to Deviation, right? Deviation Games, it's never been outright confirmed that their PlayStation game's been canceled. However, it highly appears that it was. What happened? Like 70% of that staff was laid off. And who knows what's going on with that studio now. If, and this is a huge if Haven's game comes out and it commercially underperforms, if Firewalk's game comes out and commercially underperforms, If the Last of Us multiplayer game either gets completely canceled at some point or whenever it ships, it can't maintain a player base, I mean, you're going to see layoffs. And that's concerning, right? That's the concern for these studios. So I don't think it's doom and gloom, like the end of the world if some of these games start coming out and not hitting. Like, I don't think PlayStation's business just suddenly collapses. But I think the more concerning thing here is for these individual studios. So who knows? Some of these are going to succeed. We like to talk about how it's inevitable that some of them are going to fail, because it is. There are going to be games that succeed, right? It's not one of these scenarios when I say that making live service right now is very risky. That's not me saying like there's just no successes. Like everyone that ships a live service game fails. That's not true at all. There's all sorts of service games that do really, really well and really, really good. It's just also the reality that competition specifically in multiplayer live service games is so extreme, more than single player, by the way. It's what I keep emphasizing. I'm not saying specifically that single player games are safe. I'm saying competition per user is so much more fierce in live service that it is impossible for all of these games to hit, or even for most of these games to hit. A lot of them are going to fail. Is that going to be 50% fail? I don't know. Is it going to be 40% fail? I don't know. Is it going to be 70% fail? I don't know, but a lot of them are going to fail. And maybe Sony gets the next Destiny out of it in the end, and on Sony's perspective, it's all sugar and rainbows. But what about those studios? What happens to them? We'll have to see. I think we had some super chats come in. We do. Holy cow, this one is incredibly generous. True Gamer dropped a 50. Whoa, True Gamer, my friend, that is extraordinarily generous. First of all, you absolutely did not have to do that. That is like ridiculously generous of you. I very, very, very much appreciate that. That is, wow, that's ridiculous. Every AAA doesn't need to be live service, single player only, massive open world game. Think a combo of open, single player, live service, and shorter controlled AAA games need to coexist, which could cut down on dev cycles. What happens to smaller 5 to 6 hour games? True Gamer, you are preaching. I could not agree with this more. I've said a bunch of times, I think that Miles Morales, what they did with that was so genius. So genius. They were able to get that out pretty quick whenever you look at from Spider-Man 2018 to that game. Smaller, tighter experience. At launch, it was a little bit cheaper in price, right? Didn't that launch at like $49.99 for just like the just Miles? And then you could, of course, get the better edition, which also had, remastered and stuff on there. Ideally, you want a balance of all of this stuff. And the risk is when you get into a Ubisoft scenario. I told you guys, right? I'm wrong sometimes, but also sometimes I'm very, very right. And I told people from the day Ubisoft announced, we are all in on free-to-play and live service. I was like, wow, this is a bad idea. Good luck. And what has happened to Ubisoft? They are in a disastrous state currently. Doesn't mean Ubisoft can't pull themselves back out. But if you look at A, the output from Ubisoft in the last few years, and B, even their financials, they are in a terrible position. And it was because of this massive all-at-once pivot to free-to-play and live service. Every single publisher in the industry should be looking at Ubisoft, and they should go, we don't want to do that. Like, I hate to say it. I apologize to anyone that works at Ubisoft. I'm not saying Ubisoft has a ton of talent. I'm saying their business strategy. Every publisher in this industry should be looking at Ubisoft, and they should go, ooh, I'm glad they made the mistake, so we don't do that. Live service, sure. Every company should be working on some live service. It's business negligence if you're not trying to make a live service game, right? You should be trying to make that. You also shouldn't only be making single player games, right? You should be making multiplayer. It's all about, you are preaching right here, True Gamer, the best publishers, the ones that are going to find the most success are the ones that have a balance across the board of a lot of different projects. It kind of looked like Xbox was sort of moving into that frame because you had like the big live service titles. You also had these smaller projects like Pentiment and Hi-Fi Rush and, you know, also the big AAAs like Avowed and things like that. I think the publishers that will find the most success over the next 10 years are ones with very balanced portfolios. You should not go all in on one way. You shouldn't go all in on the other. You should have a whole bunch of variety. And yeah, some of these smaller projects that you can make quicker with smaller budgets and smaller teams sprinkled into the mix. Maybe they won't have the sort of success as Destiny, but not every game needs to be Destiny. You know what I mean? So, True Gamer, you're spot on the money. Yes, I agree with you. There should be a big balance of all sorts of different stuff. Variety is the spice of life. Is every movie a blockbuster? No. We have big, giant Marvel tentpole movies. We have indie films. We have all sorts of different stuff. George Corona III here with a 10 super chat. So yes, I want to see more games like Miles Morales. George Corona III with a 10 super chat. With Sony adding focus to games as a service, is the Factions and Deviation Games news indicate they are reconsidering? If so, that makes their purchase of Bungie an even bigger deal in terms of gas quality control. I think what it says, I don't think Sony's reconsidering George Corona. I think what Sony is doing is they're really assessing what is going to work and what's not. And I'm actually glad that they're doing this now instead of post-launch. So while this really sucks for Deviation, that it appears their game has been canceled, and while it really sucks for Naughty Dog that has spent all of this time on Factions, it is better to do this all now than post-launch, whenever the reputation for these games maybe is already terrible. Like if that Deviation game was just not shaking out and that thing was going to launch in a terrible state and it was going to take years to recover or whatever. If Factions was just not engaging enough, which is kind of what it sounds like happened here. It doesn't really sound like what was happening with Factions is that it's like an awful game. It kind of sounds like from the reporting from Schreier, like Bungie was just questioning if they were going to be able to keep an audience with what they were building. Now is the time to do that. So I actually think in the grand scheme of things, Sony's doing the right thing here. Really assessing these projects now. Like, look at this hard and fast now instead of post-launch, like we've seen with some service games, right? Some service games have just launched in horrible states, and it's taken years to recover, if ever, right? So I would say, I don't think they're reconsidering, like, we're just going to make less games now. We're going all back in on single player and we're not going to do this big push. I don't think that at all. I think they're still going to be pushing for these service games, but I think they're really trying to get that quality control locked down now, early, before they come out. And in the end, that is the right move. So it's in the end, I think they are doing the right thing in terms of assessing these now. And clearly Bungie's a big part of that. I would say it bodes well for Haven and Firewalk. You know, if they made it through the cut, those games must be pretty good. Highlander001 with a 5 super chat. My friend loves co-op, and we are not big fans of DMZ. We keep going back to Black Ops Outbreak. We cannot wait to play Diablo 4 tonight. The beta sold us. Exactly. Diablo 4 is basically a service game, let's be honest, and it's going to be a giant success. So that's the key. I keep saying, don't take me saying that service games are just incredibly risky as me saying there's no way to get success from them. But look at the studio you're talking about. Diablo 4 is Blizzard. What does Blizzard do? Big multiplayer games. That's like it, right? Yes, Diablo 4 can be played single player. It's essentially built as an online game. And that's what Blizzard's been doing for many, 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 many years. They have the infrastructure and knowledge to do it. So, you know, with these new studios and these other studios that aren't used to building gas, it's just a lot riskier venture. Doesn't mean people shouldn't be allowed to try things, but it's risky, man. And yeah, Diablo 4 is going to be massive. Massive, massive, massive Highlander. That thing's tracking to be giga huge. All right. Member questions. Member questions. Has every member gotten hit? Yeah, I think every member's had a question answered. All right, so let's go back to your free questions. I'm going to go for like 20 more minutes or so. Blazing Flame, hello Benji. I am wondering, do you think PlayStation didn't reveal that many first-party games before they don't want to take the spotlight away from Spidey 2? Or do you think they changed their marketing strategy and maybe reveal those games closer to launch? I just think they're not ready. You know, back to what we were talking about with like Fable apparently might take 7 years. I don't know. I did not hear Grubb's quote. I'm just basing it off of what was said in the chat. I just think a lot of these studios aren't ready. I really think that's it. I think maybe Ghost of Tsushima's just 2 sequel or whatever is not ready to be shown. I think that whatever Ben's working on must just not be ready to be shown. You know, whatever Naughty Dog's making that's not The Last of Us multiplayer must just not be ready to be shown. You know, I just think that's what's going on. Blazing Flame, I think there's a chance that next year is very light for PlayStation. You know, hopefully we're wrong, and hopefully, like, suddenly we get, like, 2 or 3 big new surprise announcements sometime in the next 6 months, and 2024 all of a sudden looks amazing for PlayStation. But my hunch is if they're not showing these games, that means they're just not in a position to be shown, which means maybe they're 2025 or later. So it just might be a light year for PlayStation next year. It's possible. Yoda Soda, if Activision deal goes through, do you think Microsoft will acquire another big publisher after that? No. Or do you think they're done with publisher acquisitions and legally can't do it more? I think if they get Activision, it'll be the last publisher Microsoft ever buys. Notice I said publisher. I think Microsoft potentially will buy more studios. I think after Activision Blizzard, they will never buy another publisher again. I'm highly skeptical they would. Not even just for the legal issues, but like managing that. Like, they're having issues managing what they have right now. Activision Blizzard, they're going to take on thousands of more employees and multiple more studios. So if they're struggling with what they have now, I don't see that that's going to become easier with Activision Blizzard. And then you want to add again on top of that another publisher. Even discounting all of the legal issues, I would say that would be just a mistake in general, because you're not even, your own house isn't even running smoothly yet. So, you know, you need to get your house affairs in order before we just keep stacking and stacking onto this. So I don't put it this way. If they ever buy another publisher again, I think it's many years away. Studios is a different story, though. I definitely can see Microsoft buying more independent, smaller size studios, but a publisher, no. And if they do, I'll be like, good luck. The Zombie Plus. Benji saying, I have a theory. Bungie right now has Destiny, which is big. It has 1.3 to 1.4 million players daily. Yeah, Destiny's massive. Marathon recently revealed, which seems will be big. But what about Matter? My theory is there is one director inside Bungie that hasn't revealed his game. Joe Ziegler. He was the ex-Valorant director and joined Bungie at the end of 2022. I think Matter will be the rumored hero shooter from Bungie, seeing Destiny 2, Marathon, and Matter 3 live service games at the same time. I see why Bungie needed to be acquired, and I see why Sony acquired them. Now Sony will own 3 live service games from Bungie, and that's big. Just imagine if the 3 find success as Destiny or more. Yeah, I agree. I think that Matter is probably that rumored hero shooter. If you notice, the rumors that we got out of Bungie so far are exactly right. Before any of these announcements, the rumors that were coming out of Bungie were, of course, they were continuing work on Destiny, which just makes sense. It was that they were rebooting Marathon, and that Marathon would be an extraction shooter, which is exactly what we saw happen. And then on top of that, the rumors that their new IP is some sort of hero-based game that would line up with Joe Ziegler coming from Valorant, which is also a hero shooter. Again, I do not know this, so don't take this as Benji saying that Bungie's making a new, hero shooter. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that's the rumors, plus there are some indications through their hiring that they're working on that. So, Zombie Plus, it would make sense, because that would give them 3 service games coming from Bungie that are all very different types of games. You would have Destiny, which is this MMO-like experience. You have Marathon, which is an extraction shooter. And you would have Matter, which is a hero-based shooter or whatever, hero-based combat game of some sort. I mean, it would make sense. It'd be different genres, but still service games. So I could see that. Yeah, definitely could see it. Zinfamous. Hey, Benji, you've talked about how Xbox is too hands-off with their studios, and I tend to agree. There should be a middle ground with being hands-on and hands-off. What do you think is the compromise? Also, predictions for UFC 289 with Nunes versus Aldana and Oliveira versus Dariush. I got Nunes by TKO. Co-main is hard to predict, but I'll lean towards Oliveira by sub. Could see Charles getting KO'd, though. So for the first part, yeah, we talked about that. I do think Xbox is too hands-off. I think that Xbox themselves learned that after Redfall. I think that was really a learning lesson for them over there. That they can't just like let studios because essentially we know now from both reporting that came from Jez at Windows Central as well as what Phil himself has outright stated, plus this lines up now with Jason Schreier's article. Xbox was essentially not really doing anything with Redfall. That was a game that essentially, from Jason's report, the only thing they really did was cancel the PlayStation version, from the Microsoft side. He said essentially outside of that, they were just you guys are doing your thing. And that lines up with what Jez said, and that lines up, with everything that we've heard, even, from Phil and stuff. So, yeah, I would say Redfall should be the giant canary in the coal mine to Xbox leadership that, yeah, we can't do that. You know what I mean? Again, you don't want to be a dictator because that can also push people away, right? If you're coming into these studios and you're saying you have to do exactly what we say, well, good luck getting people to not quit. It's like you said, it's this weird balance. It's this weird compromise between being hands-on and hands-off. You got to find that sweet spot, which will be different for every team. But Redfall should be that giant signal that's flashing to every single leader at Xbox to be we can't just kind of let these things do their thing. We do need to be involved to some degree. And I think Zinfamous, that's just going to really vary by every team and every studio. Now, my predictions for 289. Yeah, it's hard to predict against Amanda Nunes. Aldana is actually pretty darn good, but it's Amanda Nunes. Besides her kind of freak loss to Juliana Pena, she's just been on an absolute tear. So I can't see Aldana winning. So I got Amanda Nunes by finish. Yeah, TKO, I agree with you. Amanda Nunes by TKO. And I'm going to pick Beneil Dariush by KO/TKO over Oliveira. Like you said, this is a hard fight to pick. Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is nuts, but I honestly can't see him submitting Beneil. Beneil's jiu-jitsu is also extremely strong. His grappling in general is just incredible. And I know that, Charles is a submission machine, the UFC leader in most submissions ever in the history of the promotion. But I don't know. I don't see him subbing Beneil. And on the feet, Oliveira is definitely dangerous, but I think Beneil is very, very tough. And Beneil's got big power in his hands. So I'm going to pick Dariush actually in this one, but that one is way a coin flip. But I'll pick Beneil. So I've got Amanda by KO, TKO, and Beneil by KO/TKO. I think there were some super chats coming in. There is. There's a couple super chats coming in. Highlander001 with a 10. I watched the cat hearing. The judge sounds in favor of Microsoft. The CMA's attorney was like Rick Moranis. The CMA's attorney was like Rick Moranis' attorney from Ghostbusters 2. Does not look good for the CMA for many reasons. Okay, so I did not watch this, but I'm seeing this opinion from a lot of people that actually CMA things are looking pretty good for Microsoft. Highlander? You never know. I told you guys, I'm just 50-50 on this deal right now. I am fully in coin flip territory. I am not an expert on this stuff. I'm someone that's been back and forth. There's been times I've been very much it looks like this deal is definitely going to go through. And then there's been times I've been wow, it looks like this deal might be dead. I am just now at this point with this deal. It's gone on for so long. There's been so many twists and turns. I'm just in coin flip territory. Flip a coin. It's either going to be heads or tails. One of these things is going to go through. I have been hearing, though, that from people that have been very much paying attention to what is currently going on right now with CMA, that things are looking good for Microsoft. So that's a huge boon to them. If they can beat either FTC or CMA, if they get one of these beaten, I still think they will get this deal through. They got to beat one of them, though. You know what I mean? They've got to get one of these to go through. And I think they can put enough pressure on the other one to get it through one way or another. Somehow concessions will go through in some shape or form. Like if it all comes down to one, right? Whichever one, CMA or FTC, just one of them. You're the lone island in the entire world. I think Microsoft can somehow find a way through concessions to get that last one through. So they got to get one of them. And it sounded like CMA might be looking good. So we'll see. But again, I don't claim to be an expert on that, and I did not watch the hearing. Benji here with a 5 super chat. Thank you so much, Benji. Hi, Benji. What do you make of the noise about CD Projekt Red acquisition by Sony? It's not real. Would this for you be a better move than Square Enix? It's not real, Benji. It's like 0% real. Their CEO even confirmed that, and people would be like, you know, well, the CEO could just be lying. The thing is, the CD Projekt is a very hard company to acquire because the shares are so spread out. Of course, you still can do it, but there's no controlling interest from CD Projekt right now that I understand. That's like a huge chunk of the shares. It's very spread out. So A, it sounds like CD Projekt themselves just have zero desire to be sold. They haven't indicated at all that they want to be bought. And then B, it's not like a Bethesda was where it's privately held and you just come in and just give them money. Like whatever their asking price is, you just come in and you say, here's the cash. And with Activision Blizzard, you know, I know that they were also a publicly traded company. I'm not saying you can't buy publicly traded companies. You absolutely can. Microsoft came in, though, like way above the share price. They already had basically all of the leadership on board at Activision. Like they wanted to sell. CD Projekt, it sounds like, doesn't want to sell. And the shares are so spread out that even a hostile takeover is challenging. So, Benji, I think this is all just BS. I don't think there's any truth to it at all. Now, would it theoretically be a better move than Square Enix? Yes, because I think CD Projekt has a higher upside. People will be like salty about that because they got so mad about Cyberpunk, but like I think Witcher 4 or whatever, if it's good, is going to be gargantuan. I think the sequel to Cyberpunk 2077, if it's even remotely good, is going to be gargantuan. Like the belief that like CD Projekt's dead and doomed because of Cyberpunk 2077 was always crazy talk. So if you're telling me like you just could get one of these, I would definitely, for me, go for CD Projekt over Square Enix, personally. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's any truth to it at all. All right, we're going for like 10 more minutes and then I'm out. Todd Perfect 91, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse will make records. I think that movie will win the Oscar for animation. How big do you think will be Spider-Man 2? The metrics online are juggernaut levels. Yes, Across the Spider-Verse looks like it's going to massively overperform. You know, the original Spider-Verse movie wasn't that big. How big was Into the Spider-Verse's total box office? Wasn't it in the 300 million range? Maybe it eventually creeped over 4. Nope, I was right. 384. So, yeah, dude, the original Into the Spider-Verse, not the 384 million's a flop by any means, but it wasn't this, like, giant, you know, $500 million to $1 billion box office. It's 384 million. Successful, but nothing crazy. Into this Across the Spider-Verse is tracking to obliterate Into the Spider-Verse. This thing is tracking crazy. If you look at the metrics, not Spider-Man 2, the movie Across the Spider-Verse, it's tracking to like completely annihilate the first movie. So should be massive. Reviews are through the roof. I agree. It's definitely going to be Oscar nominated and maybe even win. How big Spider-Man 2 going to be? Potentially the biggest launch in the history of PlayStation, right? It's that or Ragnarok. It's going to be, at worst, the second biggest launch ever for PlayStation. And to be honest with you, a very strong chance number one. So the answer, top two in the history of PlayStation. Right now, I lean towards number one. But at worst case scenario, it's the second biggest launch in the history of PlayStation. So crazy. Oh, I think Highlander gifted a membership. That's super kind of you, Highlander. Yep, Highlander gifted a membership, and it went to Perfect Shogun. Congrats, Perfect Shogun. You are now a channel member. If you have any questions, Perfect Shogun, drop it into the chat. Highlander was kind enough to gift a sub. So for the next month, you are now a channel member. Let me make sure that there's no channel members yet that haven't gotten a member question answered. Hamishly Ford said hi. What is up, Hamish? Great to see you. Blazing Flame, here's a channel member question from Blazing Flame. Will we get a second PlayStation Showcase later this year focusing on first party, or do you think there will save it until next year? Also, do you think Beyond Good and Evil 2 will release or shelved? Great questions. A second showcase, right now I lean towards unlikely. If we're talking showcase, there's absolutely going to be more state of plays. Right now I lean towards there's probably not going to be a second showcase, but I would not rule it out because this one was early enough in the year that they could squeeze another one in. You know, I theorized maybe they're going to bring back PlayStation Experience in December. Maybe. So right now I would put it as I don't think there's going to be a second one. States of plays, obviously, but I wouldn't rule it out either. Like, I'm not like super firm on that. Oh, it's not going to happen. It might. It might. They did it early enough in the year. They could if they want. And will Beyond Good and Evil 2 ever release? I'm doubtful. We'll see. That game's been in development for how freaking long, and it's not even anything like the first game. It's like this weird giant service game when the first one was this small project from the beginning. I don't know. That screams to me canceled game, but we'll see. Wow, you guys are so kind. Benji also gifted a channel membership. Benji, super kind of you. Ugo Galimbarti just got the gifted membership from Benji. So kind of you, Benji. Ugo, drop a question if you've got one, man. You are now a channel member for the next month. You guys are so generous. And Benji, let me get a member question answered for Benji as well. Benji, do you think Tears of the Kingdom will keep Switch sales high and close up higher than last year for the rest of the year? I do not. If there's another big Switch title for fall, what is your guess? So I think that Tears of the Kingdom absolutely clearly had a hardware boost. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think, though, that that's primarily going to be focused on April and May's numbers. I suspect that right back in June, PlayStation 5 is going to be back to number one. There's just a lot of big software hitting for PS5 this month. You've got, Street Fighter 6, you've got Diablo 4, and you've got Final Fantasy 16. These are three huge games that are going to push hardware. Of course, they'll push some Xbox hardware too, but you also have Final Fantasy 16, which is an exclusive, and PS5 just has a naturally higher base rate of sales than Xbox. So I definitely think Tears of the Kingdom was a definitely hardware mover, but I suspect that was mostly April and May. I'd be shocked if Switch was at number one in June. So I think that's going to start to creep back down. Now, will it have a prolonged impact that might elevate numbers for, like, even if it's not the number one hardware, like sell strong? Sure, maybe. Yeah, that's possible. But I wouldn't expect like continued explosive sales for Switch like we saw in April and May come through to stick around. So I think it was really those 2 months that saw the boost. And big Switch title for fall. I am like pretty certain at this point that Switch 2 is being announced this year. We keep getting indications from people in the know that there is no Switch summer showcase this year. Like that Nintendo's completely skipping the whole summer showcase season. That would make an awful lot of sense if you're announcing your new console this fall. You would save all those big announcements for the fall reveal of your new platform. So, I suspect that Switch 1 is still going to get a big Nintendo game. In fact, multiple, because I've said that even when their new console comes out, their games are going to be cross-gen for a while. Is there going to be a new giant Nintendo game that's Switch 1 only this holiday? Because clearly their next console's not this holiday. Even though I'm like certain it's going to be announced this year, it's not going to launch this year. They could, but here's the problem. If their console is really only going to be coming out next year, you're going to want to save some of those for launch, right? You're going to want 3D Mario and Mario Kart and games like that to launch on your new platform. So Nintendo will have something. I will predict, though, it's not going to be 3D Mario. It's not going to be Mario Kart. I just can't see those games because their new console's so close. They would just save those, I think, for their next platform. So, I don't know. They'll do something, though. They got to keep this hardware moving to some degree. So they're going to have something, but I don't know what it is, Benji. I don't think they can just go the holiday with nothing. All right, just a couple more questions and we're out. Couple more and then we got to close it. Because I got to go to work. Marvel Fanatic, Benji, do you think PlayStation is making a mistake when they're spending 60% on live service compared to 40% on traditional? And do you think if these live service succeed, it will be their main focus? Ooh, Is it a mistake to go that heavy? 60-40. I'd say it might be. Marvel Fanatic, it might be. Now, one talking point I tried to make sure to point out to people was that Sony's not spending less on traditional games, because that's one narrative that went around. They saw this 60-40 split, and people were like, oh my God, they're spending like way less on traditional games that we love. That's not true. They're actually spending basically around the same to not a little bit more on traditional games. However, they're also adding on top of that a giant 60%. This is just like extra. So like, take whatever number they were spending right now on traditional games and then just dump a ton more on top of it for service. That's essentially what's happening here. It's not that they're taking away from traditional. They're just adding a ton more on top. But the question isn't, hey, that Marvel Fanatic's asking. It's not, hey, they're making less single player. It's, is that even with the additional context, is 60-40 still a little extreme? I think it might be a mistake. Yeah, I think it might be a mistake. Because I'm telling you, I think a lot of these are going to fail. So I don't know if I would go that heavy. Maybe 50-50 makes more sense. So yeah, maybe. They might lose a lot of money on some of this, to be honest with you. But they might not. You never know. But I have a hunch they're going to lose a lot of money on a lot of these games. Not all of them. Some of them will hit, but I think they're going to lose a lot on some of them. Ghost Tunnels, no, I wouldn't freak out this much. Ghost Tunnel says, I'm worried about PlayStation. Why is PlayStation hiding 99% of their first-party titles? Do you think the recent showcase is them preparing people for less first-party single-player games? No. I know it's easy to have that feeling whenever the showcase was really outside of Spider-Man. It was all live service from first-party, right? It was Haven's game. It was Firewalk's game. It was I keep forgetting the name of it. Helldivers 2, which is like some sort of service co-op game. Not like to the degree it seems that Haven and Firewalks are, but still multiplayer game. No, I keep saying, guys, I think these games are just not ready to be shown. I just think they're not ready yet for getting shown off. And that's why you're not seeing them. I don't think it's that they're like, we're not making these games. I just think they're not ready to be shown. So they're probably 2025 or later. That's what I would say. I'd say there's a decent chance that it's a pretty light 2024 for PlayStation. Not a lock, but there's some indications it might be. Sam Rockner, what's your thoughts on Knights of the Old Republic remake? Do you think that it will eventually come out, or do you think it will get shelved? Any prediction when we will see it? If successful, a remake of KOTOR 2 is likely? This, I don't know, Sam. This seems like a doomed project. From all of the rumblings and things we've seen, I think eventually it does get shipped. I know Grubb doesn't think so. He didn't say that it's like insider info, like he's found out they're not shipping this game. He's just said his belief from what he's seen is he thinks this game's never making it out the door, or if it does, it won't be like what was originally promised. I think it eventually does come out, but I think it could just be years away. Sounds like this project has been true development hell, so, you know. And if it's successful, will KOTOR 2 remake happen? Maybe. Depends on how much it sells. I mean, if it sold 10 million units, yeah. They'd either do a KOTOR 2 remake or they'd do another KOTOR. Like, if it's a huge hit like Fallen Order was, for sure. But we need to see what this game even ships like, if it ever even ships. What's up, Red Dead series? Sorry about my dog. There's a delivery, so he's going crazy. Right at the end of the chat. Drift23, Benji, do you think we will finally getting a Superman game? The CEO of Warner Discovery teased that. Also, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League fails. What do you think WB Games should do next with DC? I think we will get a Superman game because it sounds like from James Gunn's indications that these WB games are now going to be tied into their connected universe, and they're going to use the same actors. So I think they're going to want to tie this all into each other, and Superman's the first movie that's coming out for the new DC. So that makes sense, yeah. I mean, it would line up with the things James Gunn has told us. So I suspect there will be a Superman game, yes. Cookie Cutter, Benji, do you think we'll get Star Wars Battlefront 3 or a new Star Wars Battlefront game in the future? I could see it happening one day. I have no idea when, though. It doesn't sound like it's in development anywhere, so if it does happen, it's going to be quite a while. EA has multiple Star Wars games in development, but they're not Battlefront, right? It's whatever this new giant open world, it sounds like, game that Massive's making. Respawn's making a shooter, but not Battlefront. They kind of said that. They're like, there's a new shooter coming from Respawn that's Star Wars, but it's not a Battlefront game. And then there's like a tactics Star Wars game coming from EA. But, you know... Will another Battlefront happen one day? Sure. I'm sure someone at some point will make one, but I have no idea when. It could be many years away. DC fan, Benji, when do you think we will get another traditional Batman game starring Batman, and who do you think will be making it? If Rocksteady or WB Montreal, thanks and keep up the good work. Well, I've settled for a long time that one of the biggest mistakes I ever saw in the video game industry was Rocksteady just killing the Batman Arkham series and making Suicide Squad. One of the craziest choices I've ever seen in the history of the video game industry. If I was at WB, I would have not allowed them to do that. This is what we talked about, where it's like there's this balance that has to come through between letting studios just do their thing and also somewhat control things. And who knows, maybe this came from WB themselves. Maybe WB told Rocksteady, we want you to make a service online game. Like, you know, we don't want you to make a single player project. Maybe. I would say that was insane. If I was at WB, what I would have told Rocksteady, whether it was Rocksteady wanting to make a new different game or someone else, I'd say, okay, well, we need another Batman game. I'm sure there are some people at Rocksteady that want to make another Batman game. So, and if you want to make something else, that is okay too. We're going to start up on the next Batman Arkham game because it's a massive franchise. You don't just kill massive franchises, you keep them going. Okay? So I would say, especially one that's only had 3 games, I know that there was Origins too, so I guess technically 4, but I'm referring to the trilogy from Rocksteady. There were still only 3 of those. I'd be like, okay, so we're going to make another Batman game. Find out who at Rocksteady wants to continue making Batman. And if you guys really are that passionate about doing something else as well, then some of you, a small strike team, can start pre-production on something else while the bulk of the studio still works on the next Batman game. And then, okay, over time, you can transition more people to that other project or staff up for that other project if things are paying off well. We know you guys can make a Batman game, so it makes sense for you to continue making a Batman game. We have no idea if you can make something else, considering look at what has now happened with Suicide Squad and how long it's been since Rocksteady shipped a game. It's crazy to me that this was the decision to just be like, the biggest franchise WB had at the time was literally the Batman Arkham series, and just being like, we're not going to make those anymore. And instead, we're going to spend 10 years making something else. Didn't pay off. And hindsight's 2020, but it didn't pay off. Even if Suicide Squad's a huge hit, it still didn't pay off. It still will not justify how long it took to get a game out with no Batman in between there. So, crazy. That was a crazy, crazy leadership decision. Sometimes you see that happen, and that was one of them. But I'm sure someone's going to make a Batman game at some point, but I have no idea who. All right, we're going to have to close the chat because I got to go to work. Let me see. Any membership questions that I didn't get right at the end? Oh, Highlander had a super chat I missed? Oh, yeah. Good catch. Dude, Highlander, thank you. I missed that. And then I'll also get this Highlander member question too. Highlander001 with a 2 super chat. Who wins an MMA fight, Godzilla or Gamera? Ooh. I got to go with Godzilla. I got to always go with Godzilla. I love Godzilla. That might be a biased pick, but I'm always going to pick Godzilla. Now, if you said Godzilla or King Kong and we're talking MMA, I would actually go King Kong because King Kong has those arms that would be great for grappling, and I could definitely see him getting he'd have to be careful because the spikes on the back, but I could definitely see him getting a rear naked choke, maybe even dropping for a guillotine choke. The head would be through the arm. So if he's doing that, his atomic blast, it wouldn't be hitting Kong. An armbar would be tough because Godzilla could, of course, just turn over and blast him in the face. But I would say the better MMA matchup would be King Kong. I think King Kong would have some good grappling with those big, strong arms. And then I saw something I wanted to answer as well. Where was that? Oh yeah, and Highlander's member question said, I see AI helping with video game development. I'm hopeful about this, by the way. So there's this huge debate about AI right now, especially within the arts, right? Whether we're talking about movies, whether we're talking about actual artwork like paintings and drawings, or video games or music. I'd love to see AI be able to help game development, but not in a way that negatively impacts the people working in the industry. So what I don't like is this idea that just AI is going to generate all the art now, or that AI is going to just write all of the scripts for the game. And it's just going to write the story for the game. And, at some point we have to ask ourselves, and I'm a proponent of AI in some ways. I think AI is going to be able to radically change the world for the better in many areas. I think medicine, we're going to see incredible breakthroughs through AI. I think in many science areas, AI can have many incredible breakthroughs for us. But at the same time, even though I'm pro AI in some ways, there are things that we have to ask ourselves that just because something can do something for us, does that mean we want to give that up? And that's going to be an existential question for the human race, right? If we get to the point that an AI can just create stunning artwork that is even better than 99% of humans can make, we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want? Right? Do we want to do that? Or do we want to still allow humans to be creative and create these things and still pour money into things that humans can make? And, if we get to a point, let's say theoretically, that an AI from the ground up could just build a game better than Naughty Dog. Do we want that? You know, some people maybe do. Some people are like, I don't care that Naughty Dog is a ton of people, hundreds of people that are, you know, their passion is to make games. This AI can just make one better than them. I want that AI game. Maybe some people feel that way, but I don't know if I lean that way, right? I think AI is going to be a very potentially dangerous, useful, but also risky tool for people. It's going to be interesting. I'd love to see AI help game development in some ways. If it can make some things easier for people without putting them out of work, then I am for AI being used in those ways. What I'm not for AI is if it's a scenario where it's like, okay, now we're laying off like all of our art team because we're just letting AI do it now. I'm not in favor of that. Okay, we're just going to lay off our programmers because AI gets to a point where it can just program the game better than that. I'm not in favor of that. It's going to be this weird thing. If it can help streamline game development and make it easier, great. If it's outright replacing people, not for it. All right, I got to call it there, guys. Thanks for a great chat. Thanks for a great turnout. Thanks for all of the super chats. Thanks for all the memberships. Thanks for just being awesome. Thanks for all of the support as always. I'm at almost 70K on Twitter. I'm about to pass it, which is super, super cool. The 10K milestones are always exciting for me. I'm a nerd. You know, I like numbers. I like to see numbers go up, and I'm about to cross 70,000. It's going to be in the next couple weeks. So thanks for all of that support, guys, on Twitter. Thanks for all of the support on YouTube. Thanks for being amazing. Thanks for everything you guys do for me. As always, stay safe, play some games, like the video if you haven't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys either next week on YouTube or I will see you on Twitter here very soon later today. Okay, have a good one, guys. Thanks. Bye. Bye 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 bye.